Alrighty. With that said, let's get started on our first session of the day. What does it take to attract Gen Z candidates to your company this fall? And I'm going to be very excited to bring speakers onto the stage. We have here Casey Jo Chapman, North America Campus Recruiting Lead at Protiviti. And then we also have joining us Nandi Howard, University Recruiting and Early Career Manager at Ulta Beauty. Welcome both. Thank you so much for being here. And why don't we just go ahead and dive in? My first question is actually for the both of you today. Would love to start us off by asking just what is unique about your early careers program and process that really gives job seekers the information that they need in order to decide whether or not to apply. Let's start perhaps with Nandi and then follow up with Casey Jo.
All right, yeah, sounds good. Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining. I know definitely at Ulta, of course, I'm a little biased, but there's definitely a few things that I think make us unique from an early career standpoint. I think what specifically distinguishes us is our forward-thinking approach in allowing students to kind of experience us before they have to make a serious decision on their career. And when I say that, what that means is they can work with us at the age of 16 as minors and really get bought into what does it mean to work in the retail industry? What do career paths look like in the retail industry? We hire minors and we really try and make it a point not to just give them a job, while they're in school, while they're in high school. We really try and give them an experience where they feel that they're being invested in so that down the road when they can consider us for, larger opportunities for internships and full-time opportunities, they know who we are, they know what we stand for, they know how they'll be treated as employees. So yeah, that's definitely, I think, our special sauce, and I think it's definitely specific to the retail industry, unfortunately, but we leverage it. We all have to play to our strengths, and that happens to be our strength. Another thing that we really try and do is by bringing them in early on, like while they're in high school, and allowing them to trial, what it means to work for Ulta at that time. We get a chance to really debunk all the myths they have about working in this space. I think for every industry, we've all had like an idea of what that means, like working in consulting. There's going to be no work-life balance, or working in finance, it's going to be a boys club. Working in retail, a lot of people assume there's no money and there's no like opportunities for you to grow and develop and stay for a long time. But we really try and make it a point during that time to reteach them, or like to break down a lot of those myths that they believe, especially with BIPOC candidates, so that they can consider us for future opportunities.
So much to unpack there. Thank you so much, Nandi, for that. I love especially that emphasis on those long-term relationships. I know when I worked in retail when I was in high school, I had no idea what types of opportunities were available. So exciting to hear that Ulta is able to really offer that. But would love to hear perhaps a little bit, Casey Jo, from your perspective, some of the ways in which the Protiviti Early Careers Program is unique and stands out.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining, and thanks for having me to the Handshake team. I think one interesting thing about Protiviti as a global consulting firm is there's often many misconceptions, work-life blend, as well as, that someone needs to have experience in multiple industries before embarking upon a career in consulting. And so for us, while we do have a robust experience and executive hiring pipeline as well, we hire hundreds of entry-level talent and interns annually. And that's really important to the pipeline of our talent, which is indeed our product, right? Our people are our product at an organization like Protiviti. And so what we think is important is that we start educating candidates and applicants early on in the process. And so whether they are a freshman and, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and maybe a little bit anxious in that either virtual or in-person experience that they're taking their first steps into recruiting, we really want to embrace them from the beginning. And then as they become a more active candidate in the process, we have in our early identification program known as Discover Protiviti, which is for people that are wrapping up their traditional sophomore year, their fourth semester in school, however you would like to look at it in their academic journey. And so in Discover Protiviti, it's really important for us that not only are they discovering Protiviti, but they're discovering unique traits about themselves about the consulting and professional services industry, in addition to hopefully learning a bit more about Protiviti and breaking down some of those barriers and misconceptions that people can have about our organization. And so one way that we do that is through Discover Protiviti. We've partnered with many of our practitioners as well as our learning and development team to develop an AI client simulation where our candidates are introduced to how we would approach a client. And so while they might not have robust experience, they definitely are challenged to ask the why questions and to understand different types of industries, that they've interacted with. They've interacted with beauty companies before. And so, challenging them of what skills do they bring, and that helped to set them apart. And so we found a lot of success in really painting a realistic career preview throughout our entire graduate recruiting cycle.
Absolutely incredible. And, honestly, as somebody who works in a client-facing role, I can't tell you how much I would have benefited from an AI customer that I could have learned from and practiced from in the early days of my career. Casey Jo, would love to dig a little bit more into some of the work you've been doing at Protiviti, specifically in regards to your event series, TIF Talks. Would love to hear a little bit about how those are strategic events for your branding. And maybe if you could give us some examples of how those events maybe connect your business goals while also being a value add for students.
So it's interesting. TIF Talks are indeed a play on the beloved TED Talks that many of us listen to, and it does play into our brand. So we feel like that's important in everything, that we're kind of picking on our own brand a bit, in that we are a interesting word that sometimes people mispronounce. And so in our TIF Talks, it's been used in our early talent space for years. And what has been really great is, instead of branding these as coffee chats, which we really hope that they are, is answering questions to our candidates and opening the door into consulting, but we have a unique brand into them with this TIF Talk. And these even predate 2020. And so we did have the structure and the strategy in place to be able to reach candidates in their own environment. We can't be in every location at once. And so what was nice is we did have this strategy and roadwork in place as we quickly pivoted to being 100% remote. And then even now in our next generation of graduate recruiting, where we're hybrid, we still have these TIF Talks as a part of our roadmap in helping us to expand the network of candidates, because we can't be in person with everyone, even though we want to be, right? And so this opens the door in educating people on Protiviti. And so the content that we present in our TIF Talks evolves every year. So I know everyone on the line has an interest, I guess, in early talent or experience in early talent. And that is a challenge that we all face, is that the demographic and the wants are constantly changing. And so we have a great team that surveys our interns as they are exiting of like, what do you wish you would have known as you were recruiting with Protiviti or before you interned, and then develop the content around what do they want to know. And so last year there was a big push, as many of us know, about like the transparency into the recruiting process. And so we opened the door and walked candidates through that. We've walked them through different subsets of our global solutions that maybe are smaller and niche. And really just have provided an avenue for people to learn more about the culture and really breaking down, again, some of those misconceptions, but also really opening the door to more candidates to have an interest into Protiviti through our beloved TIF Talks. And the team that puts them on is really great. And so we're so thankful for all of their collaboration and partnership.
Yeah, I really love that emphasis on just how sort of experience driven the content is for those TIF Talks. It's a great way to keep things really relevant for students who are coming in to learn about Protiviti. Handshake actually recently published an ebook that was designed to help you discover your brand persona and how Gen Z job seekers really view your brand, what your strengths and opportunities are, and how to shine with early talent. And one of those trends that we called out in the ebook to watch is that if you're waiting until students graduate to introduce them to your brand, it is too late. From the moment students step on campus, you as an employer have an opportunity to build your brand through messaging, events, internship programs, and relationship building as well. Maybe Casey Jo, just continuing along the vein that you've been discussing already, how does Protiviti really build its brand with students by getting in front of them even sooner? So for example, how do you initiate getting to know students? And do you have programs targeted to first years or second years and so on?
So I think what's important to the authenticity of our recruiting is that we really are living Protivity's values. So we have 4 values, and one of them that is everyone has a favorite, right? But mine is inclusion, and that is the I's in Protivity help you to get a direction and where our values are stemmed from. But with inclusion, I think what's important as we drive our strategy in early talent is we don't want a candidate to walk away thinking, is there not an opportunity for me there? I'm sure many of us can relate that you maybe went into your academic journey with 1 degree and switched multiple times. And so what's important is, I referenced that freshman at the career fair and them understanding what opportunities lie for them. And so while in, business consulting, there's usually a very distinct profile, you never know how someone's going to pivot their academic journey. And so educating them on the opportunities that do present themselves. And then as they're sophomores, they maybe are more defined in their academic path, so forth and so on. They kind of are always reminded about the authentic approach and the inclusive relationships that they built with Protivity just by being introduced to them. So I think that that's really important, that we are authentic to who we are as an organization and really providing that network for people to ask questions. Because even if ultimately they figure out professional services and consulting and or Protivity is not for them, well, we don't want that. They might, but you never know who they're going to talk to about their experience with various organizations. And you only have a chance for a first impression once. And their roommate might be a perfect candidate for Protivity, or they might one day be in a buyer's seat, right? And you want them to remember the experience that they had with Protivity as a positive one. And because I think that that's really important and something that our graduate recruiting team does really well is they think about the long game with this candidate. And I feel like that's important for many of us. Like, what is the experience that someone's going to have in early talent that's going to then make their decisions to be a buyer, no matter what that product is, if it's consulting services or if it's, where they're going to walk into a certain, brick and mortar store. I think that those are really important, that we can all be brand ambassadors, being authentic to who that organization is.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that authenticity piece that you touched on, Casey Jo, is that element of trust. And maybe pivoting a little bit over to you, Nandi, would love to hear some of the ways in which you over at Alta are building trust with Gen Z.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just like piggybacking off of what Casey Jo said, like the way people experience your company, like, it's like our parents told us when we're little, you can only make a first impression one time. So it's so important, especially with Gen Z, to be intentional about how you engage them and how you interact with them, because once they set their minds, not to say that they won't change them, but they go where they want to go, and I respect that. But as far as like how we build trust here at Ulta, one thing we started off with was just leveraging the brand persona quiz that you guys offer at Handshake. And for anybody who has not used it or has not taken it, it's only 7 questions. And it was really insightful for me. We started there just to get an idea of like how we're showing up. I think sometimes it's always helpful to like take a step back and look at like, okay, how do students, take us in, and then going from there. But when it comes to just building trust with Gen Z, if I'm being completely honest, I try not to overcomplicate things. And the first thing I always do is go to the source and I ask them, like, what is it that you want? I think oftentimes when we're having conversations about people, you should always have whoever you're having that conversation about, that person in the room when you're making the decision about them and for them. So similar to Casey Jo, we take in the feedback. At the end of our internship program, which ended last week, we send out, a pretty extensive survey and we make it known, like, we want to hear from you, be transparent, give us that constructive feedback, because who knows how to get in front of you guys and attract you guys and build trust better than you all. And they did just that. One thing about Gen Z, they will be very honest, and I love that about them, because they'll give you the answers that you're looking for. So we take that feedback. And another thing is, when we ask for the feedback, we have to be willing to move on the feedback, knowing that you can't move on everything, but with anybody, if you share your constructive criticism or you share your feedback, you don't want it to fall on deaf ears. So we're making it a point to include a lot of their recommendations in our strategy for 2024 when we go and recruit on campus, and our programming, and just our early career strategy as a whole. But another thing that we really try and do when it comes to building trust is talk about the things that matter. When it comes to Gen Z, another thing that I've realized is they're not just here for the money, like they can go work anywhere. They can go work at Google, Amazon. So if it's not a company that aligns with their values and the things that really matter to them, they will go somewhere. And I respect that wholeheartedly. So I know now when I interact with students, I'll talk about the jobs, but I don't spend as much time there. Where I typically spend my time is like, who are we? What do we do? How are we supporting our consumers? How are we giving back? What are our commitments, like from a DE&I standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, like how are we taking care of the people who take care of us and keep our business going? And you have to be proactive about that. That's the one thing I've learned working in this space for a bit of time is like, if you don't say it, they're going to ask. So you might as well throw it in whatever the discussion is. And I think getting ahead of it, like this generation likes when you tackle things head on. They like when you pick a stance and you're vocal about it. I've realized we've built a lot of trust with this younger generation by doing things like that.
Oh my goodness. So much to unpack there, and absolutely love this idea of, number one, like taking in feedback and making sure that we're not just taking it for the sake of taking it, but like really being actionable when we're asking for what Gen Z thinks of us and what they want from us as well. And honestly, that values-driven emphasis when it comes to communicating that is absolutely an incredible way to build trust with this generation. The other thing you mentioned, Nandi, that was interesting was about really being proactive in a lot of the communication with Gen Z that takes place. And I know, Casey Jo, that you've done some pretty incredible work in that respect there. Would love to hear perhaps a little bit about how you are leaning into career fairs and events to build your brand. And maybe if you can share a little bit about some of the other ways in which you tailor just how your brand shows up, depending on how far along a student is in the school.
Absolutely. So I think one thing that's really important is we have a very strong graduate recruiting team that supports and actively recruits these candidates, but what year over year. So we also survey, and like, it's important to me if we're surveying that we're responding. And so whenever we survey, how did you hear about Protiviti? It's interesting because the highest response answer is from a word of mouth answer, like a friend, a professor, a colleague. It's a word of mouth. Like that's how they know about Protiviti. Someone told them to look into it. So there's all these answers, but you can really put it into like our people are our biggest recruiters. And so we really think it's important that we're putting our people at the forefront because kind of alluded to, like we don't have a product on the shelf that people can allude to or walk by and be reminded of that name that has a lot of I's and a couple of T's. And so even though we're, a Fortune Best Place to Work and we're one of the top 25 global consulting firms, and so we might be a common word for C-suite executives and leaderships at a number of organizations, it's important that we're making ourselves accessible as a career option as well. And so, what we try to do is then bring our people at the forefront of our recruiting strategy. And so at in-person events, I'd like to joke that I don't like to call it a brochure. So it's the brochure, non-brochure. We have this trifold that does tell our people's stories. So we have people that were hired as graduate hires into our 6 major global solution lines. And it talks about what their academics were and how they, found this role at Protiviti and what is their story. And so that's something that is tangible if you're at an in-person event that you can walk away with that talks about our brand, because we've all been at in-person events, either on the recruiter side or on the other side. And it all kind of blends together. So what do they walk away with that is tangible to our brand? And then you want them to follow that journey to the World Wide Web, right? Like I just sounded like my mother, but I think that's important is what is that journey? And so when they go to our website, they can see our careers blog, and we're telling more stories of, how we interact with our local community or how we are building our brand through our employee network groups. And so they can see additional stories of people that maybe they can identify with in some variety, because we're all different. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to service our clients successfully. And so that's where we even have great expanded into we had we call Empower. They're we have a lot of branding nicknames, it sounds like, but with their one-on-one conversations that are post offer that we were having, where people could opt in to have one-on-one conversations, maybe with someone that was newer into their career, or someone that was a manager level, or someone that isn't an employee network group. And so then we have pivoted to use advocates within the Handshake platform to have that earlier on in the process. And so we have advocates that are aligned to our geographical regions, and we're even building it out further, spoiler alert, where we can, have people have some of those one-on-one relationships. And it's not someone that's just on a website then, because it's a real person, and that's what Gen Z wants, right? They want you to be authentic as well. And so you can put people on a website, you can put people in a brochure, but like, what is that real person, and what are they actually saying? And does it sound coached, or does it sound authentic to who we are as an organization and that career opportunity? And so that's where I feel like it's really important that you have some sort of ask me anything sort of vibes, and people can ask anything. And that's true. People reach out to me and they can ask me anything, and I feel like that's important. And that really is who Protiviti is at the core, is that our culture and embracing people as to being a part of our organization, even before maybe they have a start date that's in the past, right? Start dates, you want them to be in the future as a candidate. And so I think that's important as to who we are, is really creating those connections, even whenever a candidate might be in a geographical location where we can't be one-on-one, because you've got that relationship whenever someone can see that person that actually works there at an in-person event. But how are we breaking that down to create that opportunity for all? And I think that's a key word that, many of we want it to be an open opportunity for all qualified and extremely great candidates.
Yeah, I think, the theme that's really coming out of this conversation so far is that emphasis on authenticity, Casey Jo, that you've gestured towards. And I know, Nandi, you as well have gestured toward it pretty significantly already. And we know that. We know Gen Z really likes to learn about brands and experiences that are authentic through things like testimonials and reviews, and from people who work at the company and peers. I think, Casey Jo, you said, I think our people are our best recruiters, I think was the phrase that you used. How do you incorporate this content? And I'm asking Casey Jo first, in your branding materials, and how do you leverage early talent employees to really evangelize the brand? You gestured towards the use of advocates. Maybe you could dig into that a little bit more, and then maybe also tell us about the hashtag #MyProtivitiStory video series on the site.
Yes, like I said, we have a lot of great alludes with our brand. And so, yes, advocates, we will plug people in early on to create that opportunity for them to have those conversations. We have some templates built out into Handshake that really just make it easy for our team to connect those people and opt into one-on-one conversations throughout the platform. So I think that is important. The hashtag #MyProtivitiStory is something what we learned is our graduate recruiting team is very well connected to the people that they are hiring. And so they really help us to know some of those stories that, could get lost behind a resume in an application portal. And so as people start, we opt them in, like, would you want to tell a little bit more about your story as you've grown here at Protiviti? And through a tool, we capture their video live, and it's an easy tool. It's right here on my smartphone. It's on most people's smartphones that work at Protiviti, and you'll get random pushes for different prompts that maybe help to tell your story. I'm a working mom, and so I've received a prompt before to talk about what does that look like in professional services, and so because that's authentic to who I am, and while that might not be what every candidate is looking for, that is an important barrier that people are aware of. You can be a working parent in professional services. And so, just asking people to tell their stories we've found a lot of success in just asking. People are excited to tell their story and their why they love working at Protiviti. But sometimes it's just the ask. They don't know where to tell their story. And so we've had a lot of success in capturing their stories just by purely genuinely asking them to share their story.
Honestly, it's absolutely such an incredible thing to hear about, and something that I feel like every employer has an opportunity to showcase. At the end of the day, a company is built by its people. Those stories are the ones that are really going to resonate the most, especially not just even from like a branding perspective, but again, if we're looking away from branding and just thinking about what it is we represent, really incredible that the team has been able to showcase some of those. Again, leaning into that feeling of building authentic connections. Nandi, we know that Alta transformed its Handshake company profile from being focused on summer internships to widening its appeal to all early career talent, so from students to alumni. Tell me a little bit about how you went about updating your brand presence on the Handshake company profile, specifically that early careers page.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first things first, Sanjana is like my right hand person when it comes to Handshake. So I'm definitely a little bit spoiled here with the support I get with ensuring we show up correctly. And with that, we've been very intentional about updating our page. And that's something that you just have to do on a regular basis. Next year, we're going to have to update the content that we have because things are going to change, and you just want to have up-to-date stories, to Casey Jo's point. And people are always excited to share them, so might as well update them as they come through. But I know for us specifically, I personally view our Handshake page as a Glassdoor in the same way as we view Glassdoor, but for college students. And as non-entry level employees, we know how much weight we place on Glassdoor, and like that's the first thing we go and look at, and we treat Handshake in the exact same way for these university students. So we knew that our brand had to show up well. And the thing about Ulta is people think they know Ulta. It's like, oh yeah, I'm okay. I don't want a store opportunity. Like before we can even say anything, oh, I'm okay. I don't want to work in your store. And it's like, well, actually we have, corporate opportunities, and we have opportunities in our distribution centers, and we have internships and full-time opportunities. So we've made it a point to take our actual company profile page and showcase those things, showcase the testimonials from our interns, but also including a brand video in there. One thing I really wanted to, one thing I'm really trying to do and be mindful of is that every student is not drawn in by the same content. Like I know for me, I'm a visual person. I want to watch a video. I may not want to look at a 5-paragraph introduction to who your company is. So we included a brand video. I included a lot of photos because we know Gen Z, they care about DE&I. They don't want to talk about it. They want to see who is in those photos. What does it look like? Are there people that look like me? And is this a place for me? Is there representation? We try and showcase that in our photos. We recently put up a few tips, and we still have a lot of work to do. I'm not going to lie. I think it's an ongoing process, but we included some tips and some articles around like, what are we doing? What has Ulta recently done? And I think I'm actually going to share our ESG report on there that really highlights all the cool work that we did in 2022, and we'll update that for 2023. But yeah, we see this company profile as kind of our right-hand man when it comes to like the first impressions with students, because we're kind of unteaching them who we are to reteach them and re-expose them to what it means to have a career in the retail beauty industry at all different levels, whether they want to work in our store or if they want to work in our distribution center. And we capture those stories on our page, or at least we're trying to.
Yeah, really love that emphasis on it being sort of a home base where anybody can go and get a really high level but also comprehensive overview of what it is that Ulta Beauty represents. And then one of the things that I know you recently did was begin sending out messaging campaigns to invite students to follow Ulta Beauty. Can you tell us a little bit about the results that you've achieved with that so far?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know one of the first things you taught me was when students interact with your brand at least twice, they're more likely, I want to say, to apply to a position with you. So the Follow Me campaign was something we sent out before they were even back on campus. And really, it was a way for us to build a presence, in the collegiate space, but also to kind of make it a little bit easier for ourselves so that, if they're not included in the campaign, they're following us. So of course, they're going to be automatically notified when we post a job or when we host an event. So I think it was one of those things where it's like, the more you do it, the easier your job becomes. Especially if you have a smaller team, I think it's super, super helpful to get as many people to follow your page as possible. We sent out a campaign to about 1,500 students. We had a 53% open rate, which is a win just because, we're still fairly new to this, but this is something that I plan on doing throughout the year, just because I don't know. I'm a little competitive, and I want us to build a stronger presence. But at the same time, I just realized how helpful it is, with my day-to-day role.
Yeah, no, it's so absolutely true, and is really a wonderful way to just, again, sort of get in front of students, right? That's something we've been talking about pretty consistently over the course of this session already. Something that employers that successfully use Handshake to really help power their DEI initiatives understand is that partnering with more schools really means expanding your pools of diverse talent. Casey Jo, can you walk us through how Protiviti approaches its school partnership to not only increase the pool of diverse students, but also to build that brand awareness? And then maybe just following through that vein, how does the Protiviti brand itself for students how does Protiviti brand itself for students who aren't looking for consulting roles? Maybe you can share a little bit about the skills-based recruiting that you've been working on to surface those students.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot in that question that I think are important. So there's thousands of schools that we are linked in, or that's the wrong term, but we are connected with through Handshake. And I think that that's really opened a lot of doors for us at Protiviti. So, we have 28 North America office geographical locations. And so that we all know the math, that's not in every state and every location. And so we don't have the proximity to be in person at every campus event that we want to be at too. It's just, there's not enough hours in a fall recruiting season or even a spring recruiting season that would allow any graduate recruiting team to do all that they want to do in person. And so through connecting with a number of schools, it's helped us to build relationships virtually, but also we've continued some of those offline with some key universities that we've seen a lot of strengths over the years building those DEI pipelines, because DEI is really important as you consider a career in consulting, because our clients are all completely different as well. And so we've got to expand our reach to have our pipeline. So we had over 350 interns in Protiviti North America this year from over 130 different unique universities. So I think if you kind of do that math, that kind of shows you that, of course, we have some that we have a lot from, but we also have some that there's only one intern from that university. And so what we have used then, hopefully that experience that they've had this summer, similar to Nandy, they just wrapped up last Friday. So we're reviewing all of their offer accepts and everything along with everyone on this call as we're all quickly gearing up for fall. But, I think what's important is our hope is that 130 plus universities now have a new advocate on their campus speaking about their experience at Protiviti, talking to that underclassmen about their experience. And so it goes back to my earlier point that our people are some of our best recruiters. And so while I am extremely blessed with a strong graduate recruiting team that I get to work with and collaborate with daily, our entire firm is important in the integral of our success. And so that's just a tiny bit of an iceberg on our school experience. But every year we refresh, are there new schools that have partnered with Handshake that we need to ensure are educated on Protiviti? To Nandy's point, we look at our profile regularly, ensuring that our newest accolades are there and are the stories still relevant. And so keeping that content fresh is important, just like to Nandy's point, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, it's just kind of right there on a talent branding pipeline. On skills-based, we do have some very specific profiles that we look for in graduate recruiting for Protiviti, because, professional services, there are people that need to be deep technical experts and have that academic background to do their job. But also we have some unique niches that, do hire some people from, arts backgrounds that maybe have never thought about a career in professional services or business consulting. And so whatever that niche is, maybe someone has majored in that deep technical skill, or, maybe it's someone that's becoming a strong generalist with great communication skills. We need both. And so through our case-based assessments and our behavioral interviewing, we have 6 key traits that we have year over year continued to make for strong consultants. And so for us, in that skills base, we do some proactive outreach to encourage some of those deep technical majors that maybe only know about one career path for them, but then also in some of those unique niches, letting them know hey, there are opportunities at an organization like Protiviti that you might not be familiar with. And we have a really strong engagement rate because a lot of those are personal and through some of the templates that we think are important. So.
Yeah, that emphasis on skills is pretty incredible and eye-opening as well. I think, one of the things we've talked about together in the past is just, the sort of discrepancy between what one is studying and what one is actually capable of doing after they're graduating. I'm curious to hear maybe a similar question from you, Nandi, which is what you've gestured to already. Branding yourself as a beauty company, but for students who might be interested in things like merchandising. I know that you've taken a bit of an event strategy there where you've shared just what the growth potential is, for example. We know that Gen Z are interested in understanding growth potential from employers. Like, how are you positioning that? How have you maybe hosted some events? I believe you hosted one recently in order to really showcase that and emphasize that Alta is a beauty company for more than students who are just interested in beauty.
I apologize. So yeah, absolutely. We definitely are hosting a lot of events just now for students to come and get acquainted with us and like really get an idea of what it's like to work with us. But, outside of that, one thing we really have been trying to do is leverage campus organizations and be strategic about the ones we work with. Like right now we work with WISE, Women Impacting Supply Chain Excellence. And we know that working with them has been played a pivotal role in us getting a lot more female talent into our distribution center and supply chain roles. And we know supply chain students can go to Amazon, they can go to all these other companies, but what we end up doing is, not only do we go to their events on campus, but we bring them to us. Like we recently hosted them in our distribution center for a full day of programming. We hosted about 20 young women in our distribution center, and they thought they were just going to get a tour. We had them working on the floor. Some of them were packing, some of them were shipping, some of them were unloading. We came back, sat down, talked about it. What did you like? What did you not like? What did you expect? What were you surprised by? I think this is a great way to immerse people when they can experience your brand in person. I think that can really seal the deal, especially when you're competing with the larger companies. So that's something we've been doing outside of the virtual standpoint, is like being strategic about our partners. You don't have to have a million, but really look at where your opportunities are and leaning in there.
Absolutely incredible. Well, fantastic stuff. I think I just have one last question for everybody. But what's a change that your brand has made that you think has had really a positive effect on recruiting to early talent? Maybe Nandi, followed by Casey Jo, and then we'll wrap up from there.
I think it's just the approach we're taking to I feel like we're trying to take the tech approach in the sense of always prioritizing our employees and creating work-life balance, because we know that burnout is real, and we know that that's what this generation values, and that's when we get the best work from people, is when they have that balance in their life. So I definitely think that's a big thing for us here at Alta.
And I think for us, it's important that they feel a part of Protiviti from the moment that they are recruiting with us. And then even when they accept, once they accept with us, they get an accept campaign where it allows them to opt into getting a new swag box where they have Protiviti branded gear and they feel a part of our firm. They're invited to events. They're included in our, eye care events. And I feel like that's really important that we start investing into them as candidates, and then even as they accept, so that they remember that Protiviti brand and that they know that they're a part of us, and we can't wait for them to be here.
Incredible answers. Thank you, both of you, for sharing such incredible insight as well. I've definitely learned a lot. I know folks who have attended have learned a lot as well. I'm excited to see where the Protiviti and the Alta Beauty brand goes from here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.